The Raja has been imposing taxes in Rentap's area, and it created resentment amongst the locals.
Rentap was one of the last Iban leaders not to accept James's control. He had this dire sense of autonomy and independence. He wouldn't kowtow to the Raja.
There have been 2 previous expeditions made to crush Rentap, but to no avail.
He had a small band of followers relative to the size of Sarawak. He wasn't a threat to Kuching or to government or the idea of government. He was a threat to the idea that government could protect you. If Rentap was raiding at will on Lingga and Sabuyao or into Kuching, then government, of course, would fall.
Now James has entrusted his nephew Charles to defeat Rentap and his men once and for all.
Rentap perhaps had 24 followers in this fort, Bukit Sadok, which was deemed impregnable by local people, and according to local warfare, it was probably pretty difficult to take.
In October 1861, Charles and his army begin to make a move to Rentap's well-defended fortress on a mountain. This is the Battle of Mount Sadok. Deep in the jungles of Mount Sadok lies a fortress built by a brave Iban warrior and his men, who have challenged the Sarawak Raja's authority for years. The conflict between the Iban warrior Rentap and the Raja has come to a boiling point in October 1861. The Raja's nephew Charles Brooke and hundreds of his army are deployed to Mount Sadok with heavy armories.
Charles Brooke had a locally made howitzer by Chinese smiths, hauled by 500 of his followers, by Malays and Dayaks and Chinese, up the mountain, up Bukit Sadok.
I think Sadok was most important because it was such a symbolic event. The hauling of the cannon was epic in its nature. He's going to win this one by hook or by crook.
On the fateful day, the 2 sides engage in a fierce battle. However, Rentap's fort cannot withstand the intense attacks from the Raja's firepower. The Mount Sadok fort is hit by the cannon, and the walls eventually give way. But Rentap manages to escape before he can be captured by Charles's army.
Charles later wrote about Rentap and his great respect for this formidable adversary. He made efforts in the early days to broker peace with Rentap, and Rentap, from his own perspective, didn't want to be a part of this state of Sarawak. And I think Charles Brooke respected Rentap and respected his worldview, but it was untenable in the context of the nation states. He needed to prove that he could protect his people in this nation state, and so he had to destroy Rentap's power.
I would say that the Iban actually respect the Rajas. Probably they didn't really like what Raja did to Rentap, but that gave them that realization that, okay, we had a Raja whom we should respect because he managed to even overpower our chief warrior.
With the threat of Rentap eliminated after the battle at Mount Sadok, Charles's uncle, Raja James Brooke, has grown old and resides mostly in England. He has handed over his rule of Sarawak to his 2 nephews, Charles Brooke and John Brooke, or commonly known as Brooke.
Now, in the early 1860s, there was a trial of strength, and this happens in almost every dynasty in history, that the successor can never live up to the ideals of the person who is handing over to them. And so James Brooke wanted to do things the way he wanted to do things. He was the old man at this stage with the experience, and the Raja Muda, Brooke, we'll call him, wanted to do things differently. But from England, James would interfere, as old men often do, and eventually Brooke challenged him and said, "I've taken over, I'm doing it my way, you've already handed over to me, essentially, and I have the support of the local people."
Outraged by his elder nephew's constant challenges, James makes a drastic decision.
And so James Brooke went to Sarawak, an old man, a fairly frail man, and got as far as Singapore, and Brooke met him in Singapore, and James met with him, and he banished him on pain of death from ever returning to Sarawak, and confiscated all his belongings back to England.
As John Brooke's authority comes to an end, his younger brother, Charles Brooke, is the obvious heir to the throne.
James Brooke certainly saw himself as a ruler in Kuching with a lot of, obviously, the support of the local Malay community, but Charlie was the chief of the Dayaks. So I think that probably made it an easier decision for James later on to leave Sarawak in Charles's hands.